Okay, sorry about no video yesterday, but I'm still thinking about this Epstein stuff with regard to his Mossad connections, which seem to make more and more sense to me. However, as I look into what exactly Epstein was doing, or rather, who exactly he was doing it with, I'm having trouble figuring out exactly what the goal of this alleged blackmail campaign was, because frankly, if I were, say, the Mossad or the CIA, and I had this pedophile honeypot operation, there's a lot more people who I would have targeted who don't seem to appear on the limited flight manifest that we have. Now, of course, I'm referring to Epstein's so-called Little Black Book, which was leaked by one of his butlers, who later was suicided, I think. Or perhaps actually murdered. I can't remember the exact details, but ironically, Epstein's butler, who leaked this Little Black Book of names, who had visited Orgy Island on the Lolita Express, as his plane was called, he actually, I believe, got more time in prison than Epstein himself. Because that's how our justice system works if you're someone like Epstein. Now, of course, as we're learning I'll have to give full credit to folks like Titus Frost and others who have done so much great work and has made it a lot easier for people like me who are looking into this story now. Epstein did not just have that one plane. He had apparently multiple vehicles which got people to that island. Apparently he had a couple of helicopters, and of course there were people who went to the island via yacht. So we by no means know everyone who went to Orgy Island so far. So some of the names that I would have thought to have been on a list of people who were essentially being targeted by a pedophilia blackmail campaign, perhaps they're on the manifests of the other vehicles, or perhaps they got there by yacht or by their own jets. There's many ways that they could have gotten to the island. But of course, I can't speculate until we have all the facts, which we may never have all the facts. Now, getting back to one of those helicopters that I mentioned, again, according to I think Titus Frost was the one who discovered this initially. There is, if you look at the tail number on one of Epstein's helicopters, it apparently matches helicopters that were registered at different times to DynCorp and the CIA. Now, of course, DynCorp is a private military contractor that does a lot of work for the CIA, so it's no surprise. I believe their current head is an ex-CIA guy. It's a vehicle for cycling people in and out of the public sector. So, of course, the implications of Epstein having one of their helicopters would seem to indicate that Epstein may have been working not only with Mossad but also with the CIA, which shouldn't be shocking because Mossad and the CIA tend to work pretty closely in a lot of cases, except, of course, when the Mossad is trying to spy on Americans. Then typically they're kind of at odds with the CIA, and of course Mossad does quite a bit of spying on Americans. Now, I shouldn't say any of this like we've confirmed that Epstein worked for Mossad. He very well may not have. He may have been working for both the CIA and Mossad, or just the CIA. But it seems to me that we have more concrete ties to the CIA with that helicopter than we do just, say, with Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father. And of course, who knows, if Epstein and whoever he's working for was smart, I'm sure they threw plenty of disinformation into the mix that would confuse people and lead them down the wrong trail, and would lead them down a bunch of rabbit holes, which, is meant to provoke some kind of, crazy conspiracy theorizing, which would discredit any criticism of Epstein or suspicion about his activities. We should definitely be wary about that all these little breadcrumbs that we see around there, that perhaps they're trying to lead us astray. Now, getting back to the people who Epstein apparently had been schmoozing, folks like Bill Clinton, Ehud Barak, and I believe Prince Andrew. Now, Trump, it should be noted, was not on the manifest for the Lolita Express. He claims to have never been to the island. That seems to have been pretty much true. We don't know how else Trump could have been involved, though, so I'm not going to speculate on any matters dealing with Trump. But if we look at those three big political names that appear in Epstein's Black Book, Ehud Barak, Bill Clinton, and Prince Andrew, at the time, I believe, that they were going to Orgy Island with Jeffrey Epstein, none of them were in office. and none of them were expected to be they were not prime presidential contenders, let's say, or contenders to lead their country. Now, Prince Andrew, of course, is the most ridiculous of them because the British royal family is pretty feckless. They don't really do anything. So, to me, having Prince Andrew there just seems to implicate that he was having lots of crazy parties with rich people. Now, of course, that also could have been we shouldn't assume that every single person who went to this island with Epstein or partied with Epstein was someone who they were trying to target for blackmail. Because certainly if you're running a blackmail operation, you don't want it to look like or like a honeypot operation like this. You don't want it to look like you're only going after people who you would want to blackmail. You want to look like you're just catering to people in general. That you're just someone who likes to party. So that way, somebody like Bill Clinton or Ehud Barak will trust you. But again, if Epstein just went out there and all he wanted to do was pal around with politicians who had important committee chairmanships in Congress, or people who worked at higher echelons of the Pentagon and the State Department, if he picked all these people who were overtly powerful and people who obviously he would want to manipulate, then his operation, I don't think, would succeed. So I'm sure he invited most people who had no interest in blackmailing. That's why we need to try and sift through them and find out which names actually seem like people who he could have targeted. And so therefore perhaps Prince Andrew was not somebody that he was looking to target. Perhaps he was just one of the many that he threw in the mix, sort of a useful idiot. Now, even though Clinton and Ehud Barak were out of office, I don't mean to say that they were somehow powerless when it comes to the affairs of their country and that they weren't still influential men who you would want to manipulate. However, they would not be at the top of my list. Bill Clinton particularly, because his preferred candidate in 2000 was not elected, that of course being his vice president Al Gore. Al Gore did not become president of the United States, George W. Bush did. And presumably, since George W. Bush, someone who Clinton didn't support, became president, if Epstein wanted to manipulate the United States government, his best bet would not be to go through Bill Clinton. He would want to blackmail someone associated with the Bush administration. And from what I've seen, there's no one on this little black book at all who seems to be associated with the higher echelons of the Bush administration. If I were Epstein, I would try and get somebody like, not Bush himself, or maybe not Bush Sr., but perhaps Karl Rove, or one of Bush's other advisors who maybe would not already be pretty amenable to my preferred policy positions. Now, of course, if he's working with the CIA and Mossad, they're going to be concerned not with domestic issues, but with foreign policy, of course, because the CIA and Mossad both have an interest in getting the U.S. into more wars in the Middle East, which, of course, George W. Bush did quite well, ostensibly without having to be blackmailed by Epstein, it would appear. Now, needless to say, there are still countless shoes left to drop. We're just scratching at the surface of the Epstein thing. We're still looking at the tip of the iceberg. And I don't know how deep this is going to go. And perhaps, hey, there's always the upside that perhaps this Epstein scandal is simpler than I think, and that he has no connections to intelligence at all, and that was just some made-up thing that somebody fed to a reporter about Alex Acosta, that Alex Acosta didn't say that Epstein was an intelligence asset, and that's why he gave him a sweetheart deal, that helicopter didn't belong to the CIA prior to Epstein, that Epstein didn't have recording devices all over his island which could, record tapes of powerful men having sex with underage girls who he could then blackmail later. Sure, perhaps none of that's true, but that's certainly the direction things seem to be going. So I think we should work on that assumption when we're trying to finagle out where the facts may be leading us. So as we get more concrete information, I will adjust my understanding, my interpretation of the facts, so that we can get a better idea of what exactly is going on and what exactly has gone on with Epstein over the past few decades, I suppose. Because as it stands, if we are able to keep pulling on these threads and unwinding the Epstein tale, this has the potential for becoming the biggest scandal in American history by far. That depending, of course, on what exactly Epstein's purpose really was. And so on that note, I will leave you folks off for today. If you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and subscribing. And if you do subscribe, please do click the bell, because I do upload every day, and I'm sorry about upload yesterday. Things got a little out of hand. But I will see you folks back here in the next one, which should be later today, because I do want to upload 2 videos to make up for yesterday.